Hey, we're live. Buenas noches. How y'all doing? Thank you for joining me for this week's live at our regular date and time. Normally, if you are new here, if you're just catching this video because YouTube suggested it to you, I typically go live on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern. So last week I was out in the street, so I wasn't able to go live with y'all at the right time. But I am here today. You can tell that the weather is back to normal here in Mexico City, and I can wear things like this. I'm so happy, y'all. So happy. So let us get started. Tonight, we are going to be answering some questions that y'all have posed about money a little while back. I made a post and asked, what are your money questions? And so tonight we will be answering those. But right before we get into that, I need to introduce myself in case there is someone new watching tonight. Hello. Welcome to the channel. Glad you're here. I'm Adelia, aka Picky Girl Travels the World. I have been living outside the US for almost 6 years. Next month will make 6 years. What else do you need to know about me? I am the founder of the Picky Girls Travel Solo Facebook group. It is a safe space for Black women and femme solo travelers to share their experiences, to ask questions, to plan itineraries, all of that good stuff. I am also the creator of the Financial Confidence Academy, which is where I help women of color learn more, deepen their knowledge about finances so that they can make financially confident decisions so that they are able to live the life they want. On this channel, we talk about travel, we talk about living abroad, we talk about living a life of ease because ain't nobody over here trying to hustle. So if any of that is of interest to you, or maybe you're interested in life in Mexico, because that is where I call home now, go ahead and subscribe. We're happy you're here. Hey, y'all. I'm seeing a lot of the same people I was hanging out with earlier today over on Rashida's channel. I'm sorry to hear this, Monica. I am. Y'all heard me bitch and moan about the temperature earlier, few weeks ago here. I'm so glad things are getting back to normal. Okay, so let us get started. I'm trying to be fancy tonight, so hopefully y'all see me and you also see my little PowerPoint. Okay, so these were some of the questions that I got on YouTube, on the community page, as well as over on IG. I requested your questions as well. So the first question, yeah, I'm trying to jazz things up, give y'all a little razzle dazzle here with my PowerPoint. Okay, so this is actually a question I get a lot. How do you make US dollars while living abroad? There are a lot of ways. Really, the only limit to this is your imagination. Maybe about a year ago, I did a video called How to Afford to Live Abroad. I just put a link to that. And when we're done here, I'll link all of these in the description as well. But I did a video about different ways you can afford to live abroad. The biggest thing is you have got to think more than I need to find a job. Because yes, that is an option. You can find a employer in the US who does not care where you work from, and they can pay you in US dollars. There is a very, very small chance that you can find work in your new country. But that gets into lots of legalities, and most countries are like the US. They want to keep uh, local jobs for local people. So instead of thinking about finding a job in another country, you might want to look at what are some things you can do. Now, I know everybody is not an entrepreneur. Ugh, entrepreneur. So I'm not going to tell you you need to create your own business. But there are things that you can do that you probably do already, skills you already have that you can do as freelance. One of the things I talk about in this video specifically is think about if you want to make US dollars outside the US, you may need to cater to US people. And so think about what are some services that they need that they can't get in their new country. So, like, one that comes up always is like, oh, I need somebody who knows US taxes. So if you if you are a tax preparer in the US, could you become a tax preparer specifically targeting expats outside the US? Things like that. Things like that. Um, something and as I've done both, I have gotten jobs in the different countries I have lived in. I used to work in K-12 education there, at least pre-COVID. I'm not sure what the world is doing now. There was a lot of demand for educators who spoke English but were certified in the States. So I have done that. I have also kind of what I do now is I work for myself, doing a variety of things. So definitely check out that video. Um, you know, uh, like right now, if I could find somebody who knew how to color black hair, I would pay, the appropriate price, but so far I have not been successful there. Okay. Um, so yeah. Oh, and something else. This is probably um, the thing I think most people think of. They think like, oh, I can teach English in another country. Yes, you can. Um, yes, you can. Uh, Especially now, you can teach English online and kind of live wherever. Um, there are a bunch of platforms. I'm not going to list any here because you can just Google that. There are a bunch of platforms that will let you teach English to students all over the world, not necessarily in China because that kind of got shut down last year. But if you are considering a move to Latin America, I do want to mention this company. I interviewed someone I know who lives here in Mexico City. Um, well, trying to type and talk at the same time, and that's not a good idea. Um, she works for a company that's teaching English primarily to students in Latin America. But here's the trick: if you live in the US, they won't hire you. They want to hire people who are living outside of the US and in a Latin American country. So the company is called Latin Hire. I put a link in the chat. I'll put the link below. If that fits into your plans, that might totally work for you. And then I saw, where was that comment? Haha. One profession that comes to mind is hair braiding for expats. Heck yeah. So really and truly, there is no limit here. You can go the route of finding remote work in the US, but you're not limited to that. You can freelance, You can create a business that caters to the needs of expats, and then you can make more than you would, let's say, in local wages. All right. So let me see if there are any other comments before we go to the next question. Oh, okay. Do you have to be a certified teacher? If you're asking specifically to teach English, depends on the company. Some companies will take you with no certification at all. Some want you to have a TEFL, TEFL certification. Some don't require that if you have a degree. It varies. The work that I did, I worked at international schools outside the US. You did need to be certified in like the US or Canada or like Australia, places like that. So it depends. Okay. So next question. How and what should I invest in to get a portfolio started as an expat? Now, those of you who have been watching my channel for a while know that I am not licensed to give financial advice. I am a financial educator. I will teach you how to do things so that you can make those decisions for yourself. Interestingly enough, I do run a Get Started Investing challenge. And I know I told y'all I was going to run that in the month of June. But then June came and it didn't happen. But the Get Started Investing challenge is going to start on July 6th. It is a 6-day challenge to do exactly that, to get you started investing. There are some special concerns if you are already outside the US versus in the US. One of the things that I always tell people in any video where I talk about this subject, as well as if you pick up my Move Abroad checklist, and I just thought about it, I don't have a link for that. So let me grab one. Okay, so in my Move Abroad checklist, I also talk about the importance of opening a brokerage account. If you are a US American, it is really important for you to open that account before you leave. Things get so much more difficult outside the US if you're trying to do that. Here is a link to the checklist in case you don't already have that. Okay, so how do you get started investing? It's pretty straightforward. I actually also did a video on that. And here is the link to it. But ultimately, you need a brokerage account somewhere. But just know if you are already outside of the US and you're trying to do that, it gets really, really tricky because I don't know the exact date, but I think it was about 10 years ago, maybe, in an effort to keep those of us who live outside the US from hiding money or what do you call it? Not embezzlement. What do you call it when you're money laundering? I was like, when you wash money laundering. The IRS has instituted like lots of reporting and lots of paperwork requirements for financial institutions that deal with American citizens. So, for instance, when I used to live in Kuwait and I worked there, when I opened a bank account so I could get paid by my employer, they required me to provide my social security number. And you might be thinking, but that's Kuwait. Excuse me, y'all. Why would you need to provide that? That's because the IRS makes All of these other countries report that information so that they know that I'm not laundering money. Okay. Because of that, a lot of financial institutions don't want to deal with Americans. They're like, it's too much trouble, too much paperwork. So a lot of like overseas brokerages or whatever are just like, that's it. We won't deal with Americans. So that's why on my move abroad checklist, one of the things I say to do before you move abroad is to make sure you open that account. Okay. So yeah, that's really all you need to do. There are some concerns when you are outside the US, because you're living in a new country and you might think, oh, I want to invest in things here. That can come back to bite you in the ass. You might want to look up something called PFIC, PFIC. Basically, if you are a US citizen and you invest in, let's say, a mutual fund that is not based in the US, the IRS will tax you punitively on it. So it can be more hassle than it's worth. This video I did about investing, like investing for retirement while you were abroad, I talk about like what's the best ways or the easiest ways to do that. Charles Schwab, if you are already abroad and you do not currently have a brokerage account, Charles Schwab is probably your gonna play nice with you. I have used Fidelity. Fidelity has known I have been living outside the US. They have had my address in Honduras. They never tripped about it. But in the foreigner circle, sometimes you hear stories where it's like, yeah, they froze my account and liquidated everything. So definitely you want to do that. If you can, open your investing account before you leave. All right, next question. Oh, it's kind of related, or maybe, hold on, let me look at my notes. Yes, that same video I just mentioned works for this question too. Saving for retirement as a digital nomad or entrepreneur. I will say this. It is super, super, super important that if you are living outside of the US or you are working outside of the US during the early part of your career where you would be amassing the majority of your retirement savings, you absolutely have to do something. Basically, your retirement is all on your shoulders because when you are outside the US, you might not be contributing to things like Social Security or a pension. If you're an entrepreneur, all of that is on your shoulders. Andrew Hallam. Andrew Hallam has a book called The Millionaire Expat, basically how to build wealth, living abroad, something like that. I think it's the second edition just came out. I know a new edition of that book just came out. You need to get that book. You need to read it. I know for a lot of us, because the world is kind of batshit crazy right now, saving for retirement is not at the top of the list because you're like, Adelia, gas is $6. I get that. But let's just say that this apocalypse takes, like this slow apocalypse, because that's really what this is, takes a really long time to come to a conclusion before, we're back to bartering or whatever. Or, maybe the world gets its act together and it turns out you will need money when you retire. Even if you can only put aside a little bit of money, do that. That is better than not doing anything. But those of you who are considering a move abroad in your 20s, in your 30s, Even those of you who move abroad in your 40s, but maybe you didn't save that much in the first part of your career, you still need to do this, because living outside of the US, okay, if you've never, like I've mentioned before, I basically have never contributed to Social Security as an adult. So even though I live outside the US and I would be allowed to collect it, there's not going to be anything for me to collect. Okay. Um, but if you are leaving in your 20s and you've got this long horizon in front of you when you should be building up your retirement savings, that's on you. If you have residency in another country, you may be able to be a part of their retirement scheme, their pension scheme, but that's if you're working in that country. If you are digital nomading and you're doing your business online, there is no, you probably cannot be a part of whatever the local pension scheme is. So this is something you absolutely have to do. You have to plan. You have to do something, even if it's a little, because I know right now the world is ridiculous. Okay. Y'all are talking about, it looks like fraudulent things in the in the chat. So I'm gonna stay out of that. Okay. Next question. How to detach emotions from financial decisions, or at least how not to let emotions dictate what I do with my money. Now, what I find interesting about this question is they don't name the emotion, but I bet you $5 the emotion is fear. Okay. So on my podcast, I did a couple of episodes that sort of deal with this topic. I shared, there's an episode called Freedom Ain't Free. And this, I shared, this is before I was doing, this is like, I think episode number 4 of the podcast. So it's been a minute, but I talk about how, like, the personal changes I had to make and how I was able to move past fear so that I could get my money straight, so that I could live the life I wanted. So that might be a good listen. And then more recently, I did a podcast episode on Don't Let Fear Stop You, because one of the things I talk about in this episode is that, and I'm dropping links to all of this in the chat, but I will also put links to all of these things in the description box. One of the things that I came to terms with was, you don't move past fear. You don't eliminate fear. It's more of like you work with it. And for me personally, I think about, what is the cost I pay if I give into the fear? Okay, because ain't nothing free in this world. There's a cost for everything. So if I am hesitant to invest my money because I am afraid of losing it, what does not investing my money cost me in the long run? Okay. So there's just like there is the cost when you choose to do something, there is a cost when you opt not to. And for me, a lot of times I am not cool with the cost of not doing the thing. I also did another episode about financial alignment, and that okay, BJM. I love that. Scary money don't make money. I love that. That is so true. Because I'm not going to tell you don't be scared. Being scared, having fear, that is a valid emotion. Being anxious, that is a valid emotion. And the reason you feel that way, and that may be another way to approach it. Explore, why do you feel this way when you have to make this financial decision? If it's to spend money, to save money, to invest money, and you start feeling a certain way, well, why is it? What is it about making that choice that's causing you to feel that way? Um, you absolutely sometimes have to do things afraid. Again, this is why I think about, because we often think about, well, what if everything goes wrong? And it is very helpful to think about, well, what if this goes right? What if this works out? Okay. So there's a episode of the podcast that's all about um, financial alignment, making sure that the way we're living our life and the financial decisions we're making are in alignment with our goals. And so, like, based on this question, you may be making decisions in a certain way based off of your emotions, but is that in alignment with what you say you want to do? Like, you say, I want to be able to quit this job. You say, I want to be able to put a down payment on the house. But the decisions you're making with your money, do they match that? Or are you letting these emotions get in the way? That could be a problem. That could be a problem. Uh, Very trustworthy account and YouTuber said that Social Security will go bankrupt in 13 years. Those of us contributing will not see it. Um, y'all, here's the thing. Social Security ain't been trying to hide anything. Just in the last year, I can't remember the date, they officially, it's not going to be bankrupt in 13 years. They will be unable to meet the current level of benefits in, I believe it's 11 years, because it was to 12 and then they backed up and said no, it's 11. So I think it's like 2034. There will still be money because the people who are working right now are contributing. That's one of the biggest misconceptions about Social Security is people think that the money that they are contributing is going into an account for them. And that is not how it works. The people, when I taught geography and we would get to the unit on population, we talked, there's two groups of people. There are the workers and there are the shirkers. There are the people who work and the people who don't, old people and young people. Well, workers contribute to Social Security. Shirkers, like grandma and pop, they are pulling Social Security. It's almost directly like you who are working right now and contributing to Social Security, you are supporting those people. And for a number of reasons, the amount contributed by people who are working is not going to be enough to, primarily because the baby boomers are hitting Social Security age. And there's a whole of a hell lot more of them than there are Gen Xers and millennials. So yeah, they're not going to be able to pay the current level of benefits. So either they will have to lessen the amount of money people get, or you will have to, they'll bump up the retirement age. You'll have to be older in order to qualify for Social Security, which is why, just another reason why you should be investing on your own and not counting on Social Security. Okay. If you don't feel comfortable investing your money on your own, how do you find a financial planner? Okay. I understand this feeling like I don't really know stuff. So maybe I should find somebody who does. Okay. That's like the work that I do with the Financial Confidence Academy and the Get Started Investing Challenge and all that stuff. All of the work I do as a financial educator is because you don't need a financial planner. You can do it yourself, but you do have to have some education, and so that you can make financially confident decisions. Okay, so you don't need one, but if in your heart of hearts you're like, I don't want to do this, I want to pay someone to do this, the biggest thing you have to do is you need to get a fee. Well, first of all, do you want a plan? Do you need a planner? Or do you need um, an advisor, somebody who tells you what to do? Or do you need somebody to help you kind of create this holistic plan? Okay. But the biggest thing is this person needs to be fee only. You need to know upfront how much you got to pay them. And you need to ask, are they a fiduciary? This, y'all, let me repeat this, because this is the most important thing. The person you are making this plan with, the person you are getting advice from, needs to be working for your best interest. They need to be your fiduciary. They need to have a fiduciary responsibility to you. If they don't, there is nothing to say that the investments they suggest, that they're not suggesting them just to you so that they could make money. People do that every day. That's like the underpinning of a lot of the financial services industry. Okay, so you have to ask those two questions. I talk about in my course, I talk about other things you can ask, but the two most important things you got to ask is, how are you getting paid, and are you a fiduciary? I'm telling y'all, so many people get told to buy into funds that cost them ridiculous amount of money. And the only thing that's good about the fund is it makes this person money, the person who sold it. Same thing with a lot of insurance, a lot of whole life insurance policies. Okay. So, oh, see, y'all seem to be taking care of things over here in the chat. Okay, so next question, because we can't hang out all night. I do have somewhere to go after we're done here. Okay, all right. All right, so next question. How do I get myself to be a resident of a no income tax state before leaving the US? Okay. This is one of, I wonder if the person who asked this question had watched the video I did called 10 Money Moves to Make Before Moving Abroad, because this is one of the money moves that I suggest. Because a lot of people get caught up in, oh, if I am outside the US for 330 days, I can file the foreign earned income exemption and I don't have to pay taxes on my income. That is true for federal income taxes. However, the majority of US states collect state income taxes. So before you leave, why not be a resident in one of those states? So, for example, Florida, Alaska, Texas has no income tax. Therefore, it is very possible there's a version of this story where you leave the US and you don't pay any kind of income tax whatsoever. So how do you get yourself to be a resident of one of those states? It is going to depend on the state. But there's two parts to this. There are two parts to this. One, you need to make sure that the state you're leaving, does that state have a process to I don't even know what the correct term for it's you are domiciled in a state. And that basically because okay, in other countries, you can leave and be a non-tax resident. The US don't have that because Uncle Sam wants to get his money. So it's not just about making sure that you are a resident or you are domiciled in the new state. It is also making sure that your state, your old state, isn't one that you have to do something to not be there. California comes to mind. The state of New York comes to mind. I believe Georgia as well. Thank y'all for taking care of whatever that drama is that's happening over there because I'm not on top of it, but I appreciate y'all. But like California, New York, Georgia, I believe there are things that you need to do to remove yourself as a resident of those states because people have, it doesn't happen often, but there are people who come back to the US for whatever, and they find out, like, oh, I owe back income taxes in the state of California because, as far as California was concerned, you were still a resident. So check the state you are leaving. Google how to end domicile in this state. For the new state you are considering, how to establish residency in X state. Typically, you're going to need to do things like have a bank account there, maybe get a driver's license, that kind of stuff. But it will vary by state. Okay. Paying off debt or investing, which has the better payoff? The answer to this question is it depends. If you have high interest debt, they're charging you 22% interest. Paying off that debt has a return on investment of 22%. I can tell y'all right now in the stock market, ain't nobody getting 22%. Okay. But if your debt is very, very low interest, so like I saw this a few months ago when mortgage rates were much lower than they are now, and people were trying to decide, like, should I just go ahead and pay off my mortgage early? Should I put more money to that, or should I invest in the stock market or in some other investment? If the interest rate on the debt is like 2-3%, you can typically do better in some other investment. So that's what you have to do to decide. Oh, okay. All righty. Okay. We shouldn't be having any more of that. All right. So yeah. If the debt is high interest, pay it off. Okay. But depending on the type of investment, because here's the thing with investments, y'all, there is no guarantee return. So an investment that returned 10% last year may not return that this year. But if your debt again is 20%, 30%, get rid of that. Oh, excuse me. Okay. Where can I learn how to monetize my skill set on social media? Is YouTube considered social media? Because everybody knows you can learn just about anything on YouTube. But I do wonder if this question, what they really meant was, how can they monetize on social media? I'm not sure, but there are a ton of YouTube videos on this topic. There are a ton of IG reels. But yeah, it's you can, depending on what your skill is, there's a ton of ways that you can monetize it. Stephanie Perry, if you want to do YouTube, And Stephanie Perry would tell you that you absolutely should do YouTube. She is in the middle of her Get YouTube challenge this week. So, but she does have a good masterclass called Get Found on YouTube, where she talks about like how to how to get the YouTube algorithm to work for you. So you might want to check that out. Okay. If you're living off retirement funds and then move abroad, what recommendations do you have about money transactions? Do transfers from a US bank to a foreign bank as needed, or just work with your US ATM, taxes, etc.? Okay. Um, y'all know I have talked about this many, many times. Okay, so the next question is actually very similar to this one, or the answer is related. How does earning USD when living abroad impact banking when you don't have a technical US base? Okay, so for both of these, and I have made the suggestion in multiple videos. Even if you are leaving the US forever, you still want to keep a US based bank account. Life is just easier from a financial standpoint. Let's say you are retired and you're getting your Social Security check, your pension check deposited into your US bank account. You can continue to do that. I point this out all the time. Like when they gave out the stimulus checks, a bunch of expats who had gotten rid of their US bank accounts got checks, physical checks from the IRS, and nobody was going to cash that check in their new country because nobody was going to cash a check in US dollars. I think it is my suggestion. And remember, y'all, I am not licensed to give anybody financial advice. Think of this as financial entertainment, if you will. But I am based on my experience. I have found that it makes your life so much easier to keep a US address and a US bank account. Life gets super complicated when you don't have that. So, for instance, you've been outside the US for 8 years, you let your driver's license expire, you have no US address, but you find that you need one, let's say because you're trying to register to vote or whatever. That's adding levels of hassle to renewing your license. So I say you need both. Okay. With Charles Schwab, with Fidelity, I think Capital One, you can get your, I know Ally Bank does this too. They rebate ATM fees globally. So you have your US bank, you pull money out at the ATM in your new country, life is great. You don't get into any kind of extra reporting, none of that. The Portuguese bank asked for our US address to open a bank account here. Yeah, it as long as you are a US citizen, it is a good idea to have a US bank account and a US address. It will just be easier. Okay. Um, and then the other part of this question, how does earning USD when you're living abroad impact banking when you don't have a base in the US? If having no base means you have no address, fix that. Get one. Even if you have to use like a virtual mailbox or that sort of thing. I had that when I first left the US because I was like, I'm never coming back. But I wanted to maintain an address in Houston, in Texas, so that I would not have to pay state income taxes in some other place. And just, for paperwork and that kind of thing. So it has come in very, very useful. I want to say it makes folks in other countries really uncomfortable to deal with somebody who's like, oh no, I have no ties to my home country at all, especially when you're in financial spaces. There is a video I actually did specifically on this topic called Financial Accounts for Travelers and Expats. And it talks about, well, okay, so you need a US bank account. How many bank accounts do you need? Which banks are more friendly for expats, that sort of thing. I will keep saying this over and over because this question keeps getting asked. You need a debit card that does not charge you international fees, currency conversion fees, and rebates ATM fees. Okay, so we talk about that. If you no longer have a US address, can you have a virtual mailbox address? Yes, but this is one of those things you want to do before you leave. Trying to do this from outside gets tricky because when you have a virtual mailbox, you have to sign a form, and I forget the number, that basically gives them permission to receive and handle your mail. And I'm trying to think, I think I had to get that form notarized. So if you're outside the US, it is not always easy to find a notary. Okay. See what other questions y'all had in here. Yes, I did not know this when I got my Fidelity account, but let me tell y'all, I have cost Fidelity quite a bit of money over the years. They, as far as I know, there is no limit to how much they will rebate. Like Ally will only give you so many transactions a month when you pull out money. But let me say this about Fidelity. This is for, they waive ATM fees, they reimburse those, and they do not charge foreign transaction fees when you use an ATM. But if you were in another country and you tried to use your Fidelity debit card to pay for something, they're going to hit you with all the fees. So don't use it that way. Only use it to pull money out of the bank. Okay. All right. Oh, okay. Next question. How can I learn more about paying off credit card debt faster? I think, I don't know. Yeah, y'all, I blocked him, so don't worry about it. I mean, nobody has to like my pink hair but me. But what's funny is right now I have, in an effort to hopefully keep out trolls, I have it set to where you have to be a subscriber in order to make a comment. So these people are subscribing to the channel just so they can come in the comments and talk shit. That's wild. That's wild. Okay, paying off your credit card debt faster. It's really one of these things where you need to throw as much money at the problem as you can and stop adding new debt to the card. Okay, that's the two things you got to do. Now, like if you've got multiple credit cards, which one to pay down first? To me, that's a personal preference. A lot of getting rid of debt is about psychology. For some people, they need to have, let's say they have 5 cards. They need to, if they just are paying on all 5 at the same time and they know eventually in a year or two they'll be down, like they will lose the drive to do it. So some people are like, they need that immediate win. So for somebody like that, I'd say focus on the card with the lowest balance, pay that off, then you work on the next 4. Me personally, I am always thinking about how much is this costing me. So I'm one that would look at which card has the highest interest rate, because that highest interest rate times the balance, and figure out which of these cards is costing me the most money, And that's the one that I would get rid of. But the big piece of that is you can't continue to use the card, because what folks, I don't know if folks realize this, but the way they calculate interest, if you are adding to the card and there's already a balance, they're charging you interest on the total balance. So it's costing you more money, and it's very hard to pay it off like that. So that's, to me, the big thing. Yes, this is when you hear people talking about snowballing, and I forget the other term, but basically it comes down to those two ways. Either you pay off the one with the lowest balance first, and then you work on the one with the next lowest balance, because some people need to have that win. For me, knowing that this card over here is charging me 23%, and I do the math and I figure out how much that's charging me, I want to be done with that. Avalanche, that's what it is. Snowball or avalanche. Thank y'all coming through. All right, appreciate y'all. I made a late payment last month and my minimum payment doubled. Can I ask them to change that? You can always ask. They may not always say yes, but you can always ask. With my Amex, I don't know, like all my other cards, they're due like one day, all right by them. But my Amex has its own date, and I'm more often than I forget to pay it, or I pay it late. So there have been times when I've been like, can y'all take that off? Sometimes they say yes. Sometimes they like, no, girl, suck it up. So yes, you can always ask. What's the worst they can say? No. And we can live with a no. I want to invest in an index fund with Vanguard or something like that. Any thoughts? Um, I have nothing bad to say about Vanguard. They are very, very well respected when it comes to um, like low cost, um, less of the like, oh, we're going to try and get you to invest in this thing because we make money of it. The way Vanguard is, I want to say it's a co-op. It's owned by the employees. A lot of their funds are the least expensive of their type. So nothing bad to say about Vanguard. Now, you just need to do some research about what kind of index fund it is you are looking for. Um, that's all. But no, Vanguard's a great company. If I invested in a conservative index fund, how long could it take to pay enough dividends to actually live on? That all depends. How much of a dividend a fund is going to pay you. That is something that is publicly disclosed, and you can find that amount out prior to your purchase, prior to your investment. Whether or not the dividend it pays, and they also tell you how often they pay dividends. So they could be paying dividends monthly, they could be paying them quarterly, whatever. What's going to determine whether or not that's a big enough dividend for you to live off of is how much you have invested. So let's say they pay a dividend of 2%. How much do you need to live? Because if you've got $1,000 invested, 2% of $1,000 is not going to be enough. If you've got $200,000 invested, possibly a 2% dividend on there might be enough. So you have to think about, that's what you have to think about. How much do you need? What is the number that you can actually live on? And is, given the amount you've invested in that fund, or you can invest in that fund, and the amount of a dividend they pay, does the math do what the math needs to do? It might not. How conservative a fund is and the dividend it pays aren't necessarily tied to each other. The bigger influencer there would be the amount you have invested. Okay. I don't know if we're going to finish all of these tonight. Blah, blah, blah. I'm looking at y'all's because I thought I saw something, some questions. Okay. So I am marking the questions I see in the chat because it's looking like we're going to need a part 2 of this video. Yes, this is the smart thing to do. And why I have not done this, I don't know. I don't know. Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm caught up there. All right. So we've answered that question. How do I find a work from home job that's US based? It seems like everybody's posting companies that you can work for that are, work from home. Something we do need to clarify is the language. Work from home could restrict you to the US. And so is that part of your plan? But if you're thinking about I want to live outside the US, you don't want just work from home, you want a job that is work from anywhere or a job that is remote first. Um that so there's that. This is not an area that I feel super confident, but y'all already know whose information I'm gonna suggest. Libria Jones. Um, she has a YouTube channel. She used to do weekly work from anywhere Wednesdays on IG, but she's got a YouTube channel where she is constantly sharing all of the ins and outs about how to find a job from a work from anywhere kind of job. Okay. So that's you can, but any of the big search boards, you can just put where it looks for location, you want a remote job. LinkedIn, Indeed, all of those. But if you want to know the ins and outs of how to get those jobs, talk to Libria. Leslyn Moore says yes, her live changed my life. That's who you talk to. That's who you talk to. So, do we have another question? We do. We have about 5 more questions, and I'm supposed to be somewhere in 30 minutes. So let's see what we can get done. I want to begin to invest in an index fund, currently paying off credit card, hoping my daughter's student loans get disappeared, still trying to build an emergency fund, no savings or investments or 401k. What is the best order to take care of things? It depends. How high is the debt on the interest? I always weigh what is the debt costing you versus what is the potential return you can get on the investment. And you go with the higher of those. But there is no rule that says you have to do one or the other. You can do both. If the credit card debt is super, super high, the interest rate is super high, eliminate that. And then you will be freeing up that money to then go into investments. Of all of the investments, there is a very good argument for having an emergency fund or an oh shit fund, having some money there so that if something happens, you don't have to go back to putting stuff on the credit cards. As far as the 401k, my next question to you is, does the 401k come with a match? If the 401k comes with a match, I would say pay down the credit card, but also try and get that match. Because if your employer, I was never fortunate enough to work for somebody who matched. That's free money. We don't walk away from free money. So if your 401k has a match, at least invest enough to get into it. But depending on the debt, if your debt is, I don't know if this was your question, but let's use you as an example. If you're talking about $3,000 at 22% interest, pay that off. And then all of a sudden you don't have that stupid credit card bill, and whatever you were using to send to the credit card, that then becomes the money you can use to invest. Okay, y'all. We are not going to finish all of these questions tonight, and I really do need to go because there are people waiting for me. So I hate to do this. I hate to cut us off right here. So it looks like there will be a part 2 of this video. If so, right now you didn't submit a question before, but now you're starting to think about it and you've got a question. Please leave that question in the comments, and we will do a part 2 of this. Okay, guys. So I gotta go, y'all. I gotta go.